Hello, Keller Williams Realty Leading Edge. This is Dave Nielsen, one of your productivity coaches here in the office. Today, we're going to talk about escalation addendums. What is that? The escalation addendum is the document that says if one party offers this number, your party, your buyer, can offer this much higher than that other party. Okay, so let's look at the document. The first section here is pretty self-explanatory. It's the seller's name, it's the buyer's name, and it's the address of the property. No big whoop, super easy. You should have that information anyway. For section 1, there's a number that you're going to have to write in here. But let's read this together so that we understand what's really being said. In the event that the seller, I'm reading right here, in the event that the seller receives one or more bona fide written competing offers, which we'll talk about in a moment, bona fide written competing offers that equal or exceed the purchase price prior to executing the agreement, buyer and seller agree that the purchase price shall automatically increase by however much you want to beat that offer by. So let's look at an example. Let's say there is a $500,000 listing. Another buyer has offered $510,000 on that listing. Now, you're representing another buyer. Now, it's very unlikely that you're going to know exactly what that buyer has offered, but you might know that there's another offer on because we're hoping that you are asking the listing agent before submitting an offer whether or not they have other offers. Okay? If they say yes, then it's very likely that you'll have to go above asking price. Depending on the market, that's not always going to be true, but in this market, 2022, that's very common that we have to do that. Anyway, $500,000 asking price. There's another offer in play. We're going to say that it's $510,000. Your buyer is willing to go as high as like $530,000 to buy this property, but they don't want to just come out of the gate and say that. They'd like to get it for less. This is where this document can really come in handy. So this first blank, let's say that they're willing to beat the next highest offer by $2,500. I do suggest that this number be significant, like $50 isn't really going to move the needle for the seller. So it should be, really no less than $1,000. I prefer $2,500. I think it says a little bit more to the seller and it makes your offer more likely to get accepted. So in our example, we're going to say that this buyer is willing to beat the next highest offer by $2,500. So I would write that right here, $2,500. Okay. Let's go back to the phrasing bona fide written competing offer. If the other offer is something that has been issued verbally to that listing agent, that does not count. Only a bona fide written competing offer. And where this matters is that the listing agent is required to show you the other offer in writing that activates this clause on your buyer. So that would have to be on an offer sheet, a letter of intent, another purchase and sales agreement, some kind of binding document that says what the other number is. And that listing agent can redact all the other information from it, but that number has to be shown. So in our example, that number is $510,000. So since my buyer, who's willing to go to $530,000, doesn't have to go up to $530 because all they're saying is they're going to go $2,500 above the next highest offer. So that actually makes their offer $512,500, right? And you can put a cap on it. So I've been referencing that my buyer is willing to go up to $530. You would actually write that in here. You would be putting a cap on the purchase price. And I'll actually write it in $530,000. Okay. You'll notice that right above that, it says initial if applicable. A cap is optional. I very strongly recommend putting a cap because theoretically, if somebody really wanted to go nuts, your buyer could wind up paying double the asking price. Let's say there's a buyer who says, oh man, my grandmother grew up next door and I know that she buried a treasure chest full of millions of dollars under the ground. That buyer is going to go kind of crazy to get this house. And if you have an escalation clause and no cap, that's the number you're going to be held to. So we don't really want that. So please have your buyer initial that there's a cap. That's a pretty ridiculous example. I couldn't come up with anything more likely off the top of my head, but that's why that's there. You want to put a cap so that your buyer doesn't get really on the hook for an excessive amount of money. If there's another offer that's like 540, well, that offer is above the cap. So in that example, your buyer still, your buyer wouldn't have the highest offer. It doesn't mean they won't get the property because obviously there are more things besides money that can sway a seller into accepting an offer or not. It can be terms. Maybe one buyer has a contingency where they have to sell a property and another doesn't. But this document is really just about the money. Okay. So that's how that document works. Now, when might you apply this? We really only suggest using this in multiple offer situations, which is why you should be asking the listing agent before you submit an offer if there is another offer or other offers on this property. If the listing agent tells you no, then really there's no real reason for you to put this document in place. But if they say yes, they're not going to tell you what the other offers are, and you don't want your buyer paying $580,000 when the next highest offer is like $520,000. Again, you won't know that, but that could be the situation going on in the background. That's where this document comes into play. You can use this to prevent your buyers from wildly overpaying for a property. It basically says that they're getting the property for the lowest amount possible that it would have taken. So it's a really impressive, really important thing there. Please do note that some agents don't react kindly to these. I don't think it's right. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I have actually been told that I was immoral for using one of these documents, which I thought was ridiculous, but again, it happens. So understand that listing agents might not present your offer favorably. If you have one of these addendum attached to your offer, I generally like to ask and say like, hey, would you accept our offer with an escalation addendum? Again, usually they'll say yes, but you will get a couple of agents that say absolutely not, submit a different offer. And I mean, honestly, you kind of have to bend to their will so that they present your offer in the best light, regardless. As for the math and what goes on this form and what it means and when you use it, this video should properly summarize all of those things. If you have any questions, please contact your coach and ask directly. And I guess good luck out there. Have a great one.